In the world of Moana, there are definitely gods and demigods, but have you ever thought that Moana could be one of them? Stay tuned to see what about Moana's past has us thinking that she could be a demigod. Now, onto the secret history of Moana.
We were voyagers.
If you've seen the movie Moana, then you know there is a lot to unpack here. And if you haven't seen the movie, then we fully give you permission to pause this video, go back and watch the movie, and then come back and restart. This video is filled with tons of spoilers and some serious Moana geeking out, so it's probably best that you see the film before watching this video. Okay, now that only those of us who have actually seen the film are here, let's get started. So you know that in the world of Moana, there are gods and demigods. Demigods look pretty much like humans and walk the earth like the rest of us. The only difference is that those gods have powers that normal humans do not. The powers of each demigod differ depending on a number of factors. After watching the movie, some fans wondered if Moana herself was actually a demigod. They look like normal humans, right? Check. Moana definitely looks like a normal human. So why not explore this idea further? First, we need to know what exactly demigods are and the history behind them before we can jump into if Moana is part of this mystical group of creatures. The first people came to Polynesia about 2,000 years ago. Most of these people came from Southeast Asia. When they migrated, they brought along all of their traditions and ideas about deities and gods. But as time went on, the people spread out amongst the islands, and each group began to come up with their own way of thinking and own beliefs about deities. The stories about deities began to fit each group's environment. All of these groups were really into nature. They valued becoming really good at navigation and mastering the ocean. They believed that everyone and everything had a source of power running through it called mana. Mana could be both good and evil. They believed that all people, animals, and objects had differing amounts of mana in them. The Polynesians also believed that mana was sacred. Because of this belief, they created rules to protect mana. For instance, regular people were not allowed to touch the shadow of a chief. They also couldn't go into temples either. If you broke one of these rules, it was bad news. The punishment was usually some kind of bodily harm. They also believed that sickness and bad luck would come onto you if you were caught breaking a mana rule. From this belief came the creation of the demigods.
You've been told all our people's stories, but one.
Unlike other religions, the Polynesian people felt very close to their demigods. These demigods had flaws just like people, but had supernatural abilities. They were tricksters who liked to get their own ways, but they were still beloved by all the people who believed in them. The most popular demigod in this culture was Maui, which was probably why he made it into the movie. He was known as being a small man, but being super powerful nonetheless. As history goes on, he is said to have created the Pacific Islands with his magic hook, and also to have given humans more hours of sunlight by slowing down the sun's rotation in the sky. In the ancient tales, Maui was not immortal. He tried to become immortal but failed. The Polynesians would worship Maui and other gods through chants and prayers. They would also have rituals and perform sacrifices to show the gods their devotion. Magic spells could also be used to bring the gods out and ask them for help. There's nothing in Polynesian history that says that new demigods can't be created as time goes on, so it is plausible that Moana could be one as well. Let's jump into a couple things that make us think that Moana could possibly be a demigod just like Maui. The first is that she was able to follow Maui into Lolotai. Now this is the realm of monsters. Theoretically, no normal human should be able to walk in there unless they have passed on. Maui was able to waltz in there because he's a demigod. But what about Moana? The long drop to get into Lolotai should have really taken Moana out on its own, but she lands and is just fine. Our conspiracy theorist, Gaming Duelist 15, thought this was especially strange, so he did some research on the history of Lolotai and found out that it was originally described as a place for ancestral spirits, aka the underworld. How would a mere human like Moana be able to just traipse through the underworld unscathed? The answer is that she wouldn't be able to. She would have to be a demigod to be able to do that. He went even further down the rabbit hole and discovered that in Polynesian history, the real name for the underworld is Pulotu. Pulotu was said to be invisible to mortals, which meant that they could never get there because they wouldn't be able to see it. This alone proves that Moana could not have just been a mere mortal. Another reason why we are seriously doubting that Moana is an ordinary human is that she sees people who have passed on. That's not not normal at all. After Moana's grandmother passes away, she sees her everywhere. I don't know about you, but we've never seen a ghost just walking around. And if we did see a ghost, we definitely wouldn't be half as calm about it as Moana was. In other movies, when people see ghosts, it's a clear indicator that something is wrong. But for some reason, when most people saw this happening in Moana, no one thought anything was weird. Another reason why Moana can't be human is pretty obvious. The girl is impervious to getting hurt. Seriously, things that should harm a normal person don't even faze her. There are a number of times in the film that Moana is overcome by water. There are also a few scenes where she is underwater for a ridiculously long time. But instead of drowning like any normal person, she pops back up like nothing happened. What human can survive underwater like she can? Is she a mermaid or something? And even if she were a mermaid, that would still make her a sort of demigod, wouldn't it? If that isn't enough to convince you, let's look at another time that she was hurt. The first time that she tried to sail her boat beyond the reef, her boat was flipped over. She got knocked in the water and her boat knocked her in the head. These things happening in quick succession like they did should have at least seriously injured her. But no. Moana came out of the situation unscathed, just like she does in all of the rest of them. Either Moana has extremely good luck, or she obviously is immortal. Let's look at Moana's family history to really drive this point home. Her father is Chief Tui. As we mentioned previously in Polynesian history, chiefs were seen to have a special amount of mana, so much so that others weren't even allowed to touch them. They were seen to be a bit godly. So the only natural conclusion is that those in the chief's bloodline would also have a little bit of extra mana as well. Even more than that, Tui and Moana share a lot of the same attributes. Tui was also called by the water in the same way that Moana was. In fact, that is probably where she got her love for the water. He also dreamed of sailing the same way that his ancestors had. When he was younger, he and his best friend went out into a canoe into the ocean. They were able to cross the barrier reef successfully. But after they did, they were hit with rough waters and their ship was destroyed. During all of this, Tui's best friend drowned. Tui survived though. Could this be because he's also a god? How else would Tui have managed to survive such a catastrophic event while his friend drowned? It doesn't seem likely.
I should have burned those boats a long time ago.
He and Moana have a strange ability to survive in circumstances where anyone else would have surely been at least injured. Could it be all of that mana coursing through their veins? If we go even further down Moana's family history, we get to her grandmother, who is the most godlike of anyone in the movie.
Who are you meant to be?
Tala is known to be the keeper of ancient stories in the film. Why? You might think it's because she's old, but we think it's because she's ancient herself. How else would she be the only one that knows all of the old stories? She is also super in tune with nature and things that other people cannot see. She feels that there is a growing darkness that's threatening her home and her people. She also prophesizes that it will be Moana who saves everyone. How would a normal person know that? We know what you're thinking. How could she be a god when she passes away? Well, maybe she didn't actually pass away, but instead she just changed forms. Before she supposedly passes away, Tala tells Moana that she will be with her always, and she keeps her word. Once she passes away, she isn't really gone. She's still there for Moana whenever Moana needs her. She supports Moana and even sings with her when she's supposed to be in the afterlife. So tell us, does that sound like she's a normal human? The theories that we have looked at suggest that Moana was always a demigod. That, like the gods in Greek mythology, she was born into her godly status. But there are other theories to explore. Demigods don't have to be born by a god to be mighty. In the film, Maui himself is not even born a god. Instead, he's abandoned by his normal parents and raised by gods in order to become a god. In Polynesian mythology, Maui is said to have been born to a god, an immortal woman, which is how he became a demigod. His origin doesn't really matter. It just shows that there is more than one way to become a god or a demigod. This next theory, brought on by Redditors, suggests that Moana wasn't born a god, but rather she became one after passing away. Remember when we mentioned how she somehow managed to survive that shipwreck that occurred when she went past the barrier reef? Well, in this theory, she actually didn't survive that crash. Instead, she passed away and became a god. Our first clue that this could be correct is that when she wakes up and hears the song You're Welcome, this song is all about the powers of demigods. which could be Disney trying to tell us something. If you pay close attention, you'll notice that it's after this point in the movie that Moana starts to exhibit superhuman qualities. For instance, she then is able to push over huge statues. She starts to see and talk to other gods and even defeats other demigods. If you still need more convincing that Moana becomes a god, just look at Maui's story about how he became a demigod. He says that he was thrown into the ocean as a baby, but instead of the ocean overcoming him, he was saved by the gods. After they saved him, the gods gave him powers and made him a demigod. This is pretty much a mirror story to what this theory describes happening to Moana. To make matters even more obvious, she even asked the ocean for help during the storm.
Ocean? Can I get a little help?
What if the ocean did help her by drowning her and then bringing her back to life as a demigod? No matter which theory you believe, it's clear that due to Moana's past, her family background, and Polynesian history, Moana is no normal human. All of these factors come together to prove that there is more to Moana than meets the eye. Whether she's a demigod or full-on god, you can't ignore the facts. We would love to see Disney explore this fact more in the future, and maybe even in a sequel. Wouldn't you? And that's it for the Secret History of Moana. Were you surprised by anything in this video? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.